Welcome to the March 31st session of the Phoenix Congress, where we are writing a blueprint for a better America. This legislative package will end poverty with universal basic income, end mass incarceration with major criminal justice reform, and end the endless wars by bringing our troops home and reducing our military budget. Today's session is the last of 21 public hearings on the 2022 legislative package, and we will review sections 511 to 603 relative to pollution taxes and legislative boilerplate. For those following along at home, you can find a link to the legislative package in the description below or at bit.ly/B, lowercase Dropbox. If you have questions about today's sections, you can submit them in the chat. And if you'd like to offer questions or other testimony for future hearings, please use the link in the description below. Before starting, I'd like to invite you to join us in reciting the preamble to the Constitution of the United States to remind us of our duties as Americans and set the intention for what we are trying to do today. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. With that, I'd like to welcome the delegate from North Carolina's 9th District to continue his testimony on the blueprint for a better America.
Thank you, Mixed Chair. For the record, my name is Brian. I'm an organizer with the American Union and a Phoenix Congress delegate in good standing, representing North Carolina's 9th District. And Section 511 is the findings of purpose for Subtitle B of Title V, pollution fees. And the findings do a pretty good job of explaining it, so I'd just like to read those into the record. The Congress finds the following. 1, Americans have a constitutional duty to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. America's children are our posterity, and they are on track to inherit many environmental problems unless something is changed. 2, responsible adults clean up their messes or try to avoid making them in the first place. By placing a fee on the production of plastic and carbon, an economic incentive to pollute less will be created. These fees serve as clawbacks to the payments made under the American Union Jobs Program, reducing inflation in a way that supports a long-term goal of improving our children's inheritance. 3, America produces excessive amounts of per capita plastic waste, and only about 9% of all the plastic ever manufactured has been recycled. A fee on the production of virgin plastic resin, starting at 20%, will spur greater demand for recycled plastic, which is exempt from the fee. At the same time, a flat 5-cent fee on plastic products will encourage more mindful consumption and less single-use plastic. 4, a carbon fee is widely recognized as a way to address the external costs of using fossil fuels. Most Western nations are implementing them, and U.S. imports to Europe will soon have to pay a carbon border tax if there is no corresponding carbon fee here. Carbon fee starts at $20 per metric ton. The purpose of this subtitle is to preserve the environment for ourselves and our posterity. And I think that pretty much sums up the purpose of this subtitle. So that concludes my testimony on section 511, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Yes, seeing no questions, section 511 is assigned to the subcommittee on findings. I'm looking at section 512, and it adds a new subtitle to the Internal Revenue Code with 2 chapters and 10 sections. Would you be willing to stop and take questions after the first chapter to make it more manageable?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
You may proceed.
All right, thank you. Section 512 is the carbon fee. As we talked about, this serves as one of the clawbacks for the American Union Jobs Program. By putting a carbon fee and on pollution. Again, we're creating an economic disincentive for people to pollute our environment. This comes from model legislation HR 2307, which has been championed by the Citizens Climate Lobby, a grassroots organization around the country that is concerned about our environment and trying to find ways to impact and correct some of the issues that are developing. And so according to there's a lot of good resources on their website. According to their information, producing a gallon of gasoline emits 5 pounds of carbon dioxide, and then burning that gallon of gasoline emits another 19 pounds of carbon dioxide. So that's 24 pounds of carbon dioxide for each gallon of gas that we burn. And that and so the carbon fee in this legislation would discourage, would create an economic incentive to use less gasoline. And for every $10 per metric ton, it would add about 11 cents to the price of a gallon of gasoline. In addition, many other carbon intensive products, again, will look for ways to use less of them and do less harm to the environment, while at the same time returning those fees back to the American people to offset those higher costs. This isn't exactly based on the Citizen Climate Lobby on their model legislation, but under their proposal, they found that 2/3 of American families would be better off, would be net beneficiaries under the carbon fee and dividend program. Of course, with our American Union Jobs program, every American will be a beneficiary to offset their higher costs. Many other important reasons to use the fee and dividend model is to kind of avoid the tragedy of the commons, the way that pollution just sort of shifts external costs onto others. Our environment is a good, clean, healthy environment is essential to our quality of life. And Citizens Climate Lobby estimates that implementing a carbon fee and dividend will prevent more than 230,000 premature deaths over 20 years as a result of the improved air quality. So I'm going to go ahead and get into this. I'm going to start sharing my screen, and we'll look at chapter 102. Sorry. All right, so section 512 adds a new subtitle to the Internal Revenue Code. Chapter 101 is the pollution fees, and chapter 102 is the carbon border fee adjustment. And chapter 101 got 6 different sections in here. The first one is definitions. This is pretty usual, pretty straightforward stuff. Carbon dioxide equivalent, or CO2e. Different greenhouse gases are measured in different ways, but for simplicity's sake, they would be translated into carbon dioxide equivalents, and then the tax would be figured on the carbon, what the equivalent amount of carbon would be. We identify what are some carbon intensive products. Basic ones are iron, steel, aluminum, cement, glass, pulp, paper, chemicals, and industrial ceramics. And these will be covered, these will be addressed when it comes to international trade. Covered entity that the carbon fee will apply to. In the case of crude oil, this is a refinery or any importer. In the coal, it's the coal miner or the importer, and in natural gas, again, it's whoever's adding the gas to the natural gas transmission system or importer. And as we'll get to later in section 9906, the administrative rules will be set up in a way to minimize the administrative burdens by applying the carbon tax as early in the process as possible, rather than having it distributed out among different entities. These are all basic definitions, no real surprises. Section 9902 is where we get the actual carbon fee. There is hereby imposed a carbon fee on any covered entities emitting use or sale or transfer for an emitting use of any covered fuel. Subsection C sets the carbon fee rate. starting at $20 per metric ton for the calendar year 2023. This wouldn't actually go in effect until near the end of calendar year 2023, but that'd be the starting rate. And then for calendar years thereafter, it would be an additional $10. And that $10 would also be adjusted for inflation in paragraph 3. And so it'll be adjusted for inflation, however much inflation is. The prices have gone up since calendar year 2022 to make sure that $10 increase is still a relevant increase. Section 9902 in the model legislation included some exemptions for the armed forces. Now, as you probably heard us talk about in previous sections, the United States military is the largest single consumer of fossil fuels on the planet. And so there was the thought of, well, maybe if we don't, it'll be better for the military if they don't have to pay the same carbon fee as everyone else does. But they're the largest single producer of greenhouse gases. And so if we want to get serious about addressing climate change, we need to address the largest producer of the greenhouse gases. And so this legislation does not include that exemption for the U.S. military. Section 9903 is the targets for the emission reduction schedule. We use 2018 as the reference year, and then use that to set targets going down to the middle of the century. And Section 9904 sets the sunset in place so that when we do hit these targets over time, that this program will go away, that we'll have succeeded in reducing emissions from greenhouse gases to 10% of the target of what they were in 2010. And then this program will go away. Section 9905 deals with carbon capture and sequestration. So if we can capture the carbon as opposed to letting it become a greenhouse gas, then that would count as a credit or an offset for other carbon that is being produced. As introduced, this legislation, 2307, had an exception for turning oil into plastic. But as I think we'll probably talk about in the plastic section, a lot of America's plastic goes, over to Asia, where it's frequently burned as a source of energy, and so we've removed the exception for capturing carbon by turning it into plastic, which has its own set of environmental problems. 9906 is the administrative authority. It's the standard stuff of what exactly they should be doing, minimizing administrative burdens, identifying who the entities are that are going to be liable for this tax, requiring monthly payments, rules to make sure that nothing's getting taxed more than once, and making sure that the domestic implementation of the carbon fee coordinates with the carbon border fee that we'll talk about in Chapter 102. And so I think that that covers my testimony for Chapter 101, and be happy to answer any questions so far.
Yeah. Won't this raise less and less revenue over time?
Yes. The price per metric ton goes up, but as we pollute less and less, then yes, revenue will come down. So it's not a sustainable model for funding, universal basic income or anything like that, because the point of the carbon tax is to change the economic incentives and get rid of the incentive to pass your pollution costs on to everyone else by making sure that the people who inflict that pollution have to pay for it. So yes, it will go down over time. And Section 9904 has the sunset part, so that when we hit our targets, it'll go away completely.
And that's a question about that sunset. What is the purpose of having a sunset clause in the first place? Like, why does the program need to end?
Because we'll hit our targets. We'll have reduced our greenhouse gas emissions to less than 10% of what they were in 2010.
But we wouldn't want to go further?
I don't know. Again, this is based on the model legislation that includes that phase out when the targets are reached. I guess, when it comes to pollution, the earth can handle so much of it. And obviously we are overburdening our atmosphere with the amount of pollution that we're turning out. It's not my area of expertise, but perhaps when we do get down to 1/10 of what we were polluting in 2010, that will be in Earth's normal tolerances for how much pollution we can handle.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know if that's the best answer I have right now.
Okay. And then another follow-up, you said pollution, and this was something else I wanted to ask about. We're talking about carbon, we're going to be talking about plastic, which are kind of the biggest sources of pollution, most likely. But what about does this apply to other sources of pollution, say like polluting a local river or other water sources or any other kind of environmental pollution?
So it applies to greenhouse gases. So less, not so much polluting water as much as polluting the atmosphere with greenhouse gases. But yes, all the greenhouse gases are included at their carbon equivalents. So methane and other things like that, when those are produced by various industries, they will pay the carbon equivalent of the carbon fee.
Okay, and then just one last question. Will this lead to an increase in prices at the gas pump for regular citizens?
It will, yes. As I mentioned at the beginning, burning gasoline contributes to, causes I think we said 24 pounds puts 24 pounds of carbon into the atmosphere. And so that accumulates. And so for each $10 per metric ton, we should expect the price of gas to go up about 11 cents. Yes.
Seeing no further questions, you may proceed to chapter 102.
Chapter 101, we covered, how we deal with this in the United States. But when you mention this to people, they say, oh, well, then that'll just put America at a disadvantage. And then other countries will just go ahead and do all these polluting things and then sell their products cheaper here in the United States. So it doesn't really solve any problems. And so that's what chapter 102 addresses. It is a border adjustment so that countries that importers that are shipping products into the United States will be responsible for the cost of the carbon if it had as if it had been produced here. Let me go ahead and share my screen again. Chapter 102 is the carbon border fee adjustment, and Section 9911 is the part that states its purpose. It's to protect animal, plant, and human life and health, to conserve exhaustible natural resources by preventing carbon leakage, and to facilitate the creation of international agreements. That last part, goes to what the European Union is rolling out now, where they are putting a carbon border fee into place over the next couple of years, so that, again, to stop I guess I'd say the dumping of carbon intense products onto their markets by countries and places that don't have an equivalent fee. And so we would do the same thing here. In a few years, the United States would more likely be subject to these carbon border fees adjustments when we sell products to the European Union. And so it's another reason to go ahead and put the carbon tax in place here in the United States, so that that money then goes to help the United States, as opposed to being paid over in Europe. So Section 9911 addresses the carbon border fee adjustment. Again, we've already covered what are some of the carbon intensive products, and they'll be directed to impose a fee equal to the total carbon fee, which would have accumulated upon the greenhouse gas content of the imported product if it had been produced domestically. So that's what the Secretary will be setting up. And then to kind of keep the foreign trade balanced, there's a provision in subsection D for a refund on exports from the United States, similar to how exports were exempt from the value-added tax we talked about previously. And so, so there'll be a refund on exports up to are equal to 75% of the carbon fees. Section 9912 deals with the administration, exactly how these things are supposed to be worked out. And these sorts of things are a little more complicated. So the carbon border fee adjustment would actually take 2 years to implement. So it has an effective date of October 30th, 2024. And imports to the territories of the United States. So if we're sending things from the United States to the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, or places like that are territories of the United States, then they would not be subject to this. Section 9913 deals with how the border fee adjustments are collected. You run into an issue under international law if you make this a tax, an import tax, and so this. So instead, the workaround is having the border fee adjustment, anything above the administrative costs of implementing it, go to the Green Climate Fund, which is a United Nations fund set up to address climate change. And so countries can set up their border fee adjustments in this way, so that they don't run into issues with border taxes and tariffs. Section 9914 deals with the international treaty negotiations and treaties. Again, making sure that there's a framework for cooperation with other countries, making sure that we're working together to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions to 0% of 2010 levels by 2050, and make adjustments that respect the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. And the Secretary can suspend this when we've hit our targets, and the Secretary shall review these every 5 years. And then at the end of Section 512, we've got a little more boilerplate after adding those 2 chapters. So it's an update to Section 44QF of the Internal Revenue Code, clarifies that the amendments that this goes into effect on October 30th, 2022, except that the carbon fee doesn't apply until 11 months later, September 30th, 2023, and clarifies that there's no preemption of state law. This is a floor, not a ceiling, and so states can raise the bar as well. With that, next Chair, I think that concludes my testimony on Chapter 102.
Thank you. So you'd mentioned a 75% refund on exports, and so that is to say that if you produce something that is exported, if you produce something in the United States that is then exported somewhere else, you're only paying 1/4 of the carbon tax that you normally would. Is that effectively what that means?
That's correct. To
Okay.
keep us more competitive with the nations that don't have don't have as strict pollution taxes.
Seeing no further questions, Section 512 is assigned to the Subcommittee on Taxation. You may proceed to Section 513.
All right, thank you. Section 513 is the plastic fee, and it's very similar fee and dividend model that the carbon fee uses. So once again, by putting plastic is a big pollution problem in the world, and especially in the United States. We go through an awful lot of plastic, create an awful lot of plastic waste, about 5 times as much per capita as Europe does. And plastic just kind of hangs around forever. It just breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces. And it was recently reported that we're starting to find microplastics in people's blood now. We have so polluted the environment. We've so polluted our children's inheritance, and we need to do something. So while there are other countries have done things like banning single-use plastic, this legislation takes a different view of discouraging those things through new taxes and fees on plastic. So let me share my screen again, and we'll look at Section 513. All right, Section 513 is the plastic fee, and it adds a new chapter to Subtitle L. Our definitions are pretty. Section 9921 is the definitions. Plastic products are any good intended for public sale which contains plastic, including its packaging. This is the plastic products are the part that are subject to the 5 cent per product fee. Public sale is defined as the final purchase of a plastic product, whether at retail or by a business entity for distribution in lieu of sale. So for example, if McDonald's is buying, a box of 1,000 forks to distribute to their customers, then they would be the party responsible for paying the plastic product fee. Manufacturers, any sort of, are the people, the business entities who produce plastic products, and virgin plastic resin means resin produced directly from petrochemical feedstock for the purposes of manufacturing plastic products, but does not include recycled resin. Again, so we'll be creating a financial incentive to recycle more and create less plastic. Section 9922 is the plastic production fee. And so it starts at 20% sales tax, essentially, on the sale of virgin plastic resin. And that would increase by 3% per year. In the case of vertically integrated industries that produce their own plastic resin and then manufacture it into finished products for sale, then it's a matter of calculation by weight and a market price for the month that the Bureau of Labor Statistics would help determine. Otherwise, it's just the tax shall be applied at the point of sale or point of import. Section 9923 is the plastic consumption fee, and this is for the plastic products of 5 cents per product, or for multi-packs containing plastic products, 5 cents for each individual plastic product. So again, McDonald's buys a box of 1,000 plastic forks, and so then they would pay 5 cents for each individual plastic product. And so we're not banning single-use plastic. Plastic has many good uses, but it also has very high costs, especially when we produce it and throw it away frivolously. So this is about encouraging more mindful consumption. There's an exception for plastic products sold in bulk quantities, like plastic packing peanuts, things like that, where the secretary can establish a price per weight and call it a unit, instead of making people count each individual plastic peanut. And then 9924 is the administrative authority. What the secretary is supposed to do? Again, identify effective points in the production manufacturing process for collecting these fees, do it in a way that minimizes administrative burdens, and just like we saw with the carbon tax, require monthly payments of fees, and rules for distinguishing between different types of plastic. Once again, no preemption of state law. This is the floor, not a ceiling, and it sets an effective date of September 30th, 2023. And with that, next Chair, I think that concludes my testimony on Section 513.
Thank you. Yeah. So you'd mentioned that there was that we were distinguishing among different types of plastic. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
About the different types of plastic?
Well, and what the actual differences are, and how we are we measuring them differently? Are we taxing them differently? Are we approaching them in different ways?
I'm not sure I have a great answer for you. So many things can be produced from plastic, and so it is more, I guess I would say it's more enabling language, that the administrator may, if it's necessary, convenient, have rules that would distinguish between different types of plastic.
It's giving them the ability to distinguish if needed.
Yes.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Well, actually, you know what? I do have another question. As you mentioned, we're finding microplastics in people's bloods, where it's actually now the pieces are getting so small they're starting to break through the blood-brain barrier. We're finding them now in fetuses before they're even born. And I am thinking about all of the health effects that it is having on people. Are there any provisions on addressing the both short-term or the long-term health effects of microplastics in our environment and our bodies?
No, unfortunately, there's nothing like that in this legislative package. I hope it's something that Congress will look at. As you talked about, we should be ashamed about the amount of harm that we're causing to our children, in pursuit of easier, cheaper, faster, more convenient. As you said, you're finding microplastics in embryos. They're not even born yet, and they're already dealing with our pollution. I would love to see much harsher restrictions on plastic to really make us rethink the amount of harm that we are causing. There is no sunset in the plastic tax. This would be an ongoing thing. And again, I don't think it is practical or politically possible to pass a ban on plastic at this point. It is so, fortunately, I would say it's so essential to so much of American life. But by putting a tax on it and making us more mindful, of the hidden costs of plastic, we can begin to address it. So that's what this section does.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, Section 513 is assigned to the Subcommittee on Taxation. You may proceed to Section 601.
All right, Section 600, and the next three sections are Title 6, miscellaneous, and they're all pretty straightforward. Section 601 is a standard severability clause. If anything in here is successfully challenged in court, you don't have to throw out the entire legislative package. That pretty much concludes my testimony on Section 601, and be happy to answer any questions.
No questions. Section 601 is assigned to the Subcommittee on Taxation. You may proceed.
Thank you. Section 602 is a savings clause. It comes from H.R. 1280, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which was passed by the House more than a year ago and is yet to be scheduled for a hearing in the Senate. And it says that nothing in this act shall be construed to limit legal or administrative remedies under various parts of the United States Code, that it doesn't affect any federal, state, or tribal law that would apply to an Indian tribe, and it doesn't waive the sovereign immunity of an Indian tribe without the consent of the tribe. And so that's the, it's not intending to take away people's legal or administrative remedies. And so that's what the savings clause does. And that concludes my section on 602, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yes, you said this act is not affecting the statutes, but 42 U.S. Code or 42 U.S.C. 1983 is the law that creates qualified immunity. So does this savings clause save qualified immunity?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, that is one of the sections that's mentioned in here. So our qualified immunity reform, it expands the remedies that that people will have. It doesn't limit the legal remedies, and so the savings clause is there to say that we're not limiting the remedies, but by reforming qualified immunity, we wouldn't be doing that anyway. We'd be expanding them.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further questions, Section 602 is assigned to the Subcommittee on Taxation. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Section 603 is the effective date. Just one sentence. Unless otherwise noted, this act shall be effective on passage. As we've gone along, different sections have had different effective dates, but if they don't specifically have one, then the provisions will be effective on passage. And with that, that concludes my testimony for Section 603. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Seeing no questions, Section 603 is assigned to the Subcommittee on Taxation. I'd like to thank the delegate for his testimony.
Thank you. This was 21 hearings was an awful lot. I don't know how many hours this was, but I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the blueprint for a better America in greater depth, and look forward to working on parts of it with the subcommittees.
Fantastic. With that, this hearing is adjourned. This concludes the hearings on the blueprint for a better America. Over the next 3 months, the various subcommittees will meet to draft amendments to their sections, and we will reconvene for a hearing on those amendments on Thursday, June 30th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern.